When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 75. Triggered by his wife's mental health journey, led him to uncover his own. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Faizan Sabzali. Faizan works with self-aware high achievers who are ready for the next step in their personal and professional lives. His transformational coaching helps his clients identify blind spots, address their patterns, and confidently move forward. He has worked as a technology consultant for over 25 years and found that change of any kind was more difficult to influence than any of the technology challenges. His work with his clients, his deep interest in people and what makes them tick, and reflecting on life's existential questions helped him see different perspectives that were mostly in conflict with a traditional upbringing. Faizan provides life and relationship coaching while still maintaining a career in the technology field while living in British Columbia with his wife and 2 kids. Faizan is the husband of one of our earlier guests from episode 13, Dr. Syra, who so fearlessly dived deep to take us through her mental health journey. With Dr. Syra's permission, her husband Faizan is here to give us his personal take on this mental health journey and the impacts and insights it has had on his own mental well-being. Well, hello, Faizan. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor. I appreciate it.
This is such a great opportunity for us to have you as a guest on the show today. Faizan, I'm really grateful for your willingness to be here today to tell your story. And I'm truly humbled to encounter guests like yourself to allow me to tap into their vulnerabilities and draw on their strengths and insight. So it's really important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for creating such a safe space where we can share our stories, as well as kind of share the optimism of the other side that we can get to. So thank you for doing your work and creating such a beautiful space for us.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for those words. And that's just it, right? This podcast, it's really all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through in a space that's safe for people. And the stories are meant to be about whether or not you have directly encountered a mental health struggle. Because no matter what the story, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which tends to remain tucked away. So that's what this platform is all about. It's a way to break barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So I continue to have guests on the show so we can continue to encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservation to express. Of course, I continue to bring forward a trend. It's called the mental beauty rethink. Now tell me, what are your first thoughts that come to mind when you hear the phrase the mental beauty rethink?
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with you earlier about this. You sensed a hesitation in my voice because, one of the things I always question and I always work on is my core beliefs, right? Like, what are the beliefs that I hold about the world?
Mhm,
And this thing about, like, when you said mental health, I'm like, okay, I'm on board. With mental beauty, I'm like, wait,
mhm,
right? Like, what are the beauty standards? And what? So, with some time to kind of think about it, for me, now that I've had some time to reflect on the phrase itself, mental beauty, at least for me, it evokes these images of the beautiful life, right? Like, so that we all have visions that I believe we hold for ourselves from a life perspective.
mhm.
For me, I live around nature, kind of while looking at the lake and looking at the trees, and so for me, it's like, oh yes, that perfect stillness that I want in me, like I can see that. So when you share that phrase, mental beauty, that's now what it evokes, is this image of this beautiful life that we're kind of sewing together.
I love it. And I love how it's talking about it from the perspective of just life and stillness and embracing the stillness of the beauty around you in nature. You can embrace that stillness within you.
Hmm.
Really, really interesting reframe. That's really cool.
It's amazing because I'm sure you you were intentional with the phrasing mental beauty, is that for everyone it will evoke something else, evoke different feelings. So that's why I'm coming to more and more appreciate that phrase, mental beauty, right? So we can tap into whatever it means for us.
No, I really appreciate that. And to be honest, Faizan, when I ask this question to people, it's not the initial question I asked in the early stages of the podcast, but I thought, you know what? This is something I really want people to embrace. So we got to talk about it. We got to talk about that as well. And to be honest, all individuals, all guests that I've spoken to so far, have been able to give me such a rich description or insight of what it means to them. And so to me, that was fulfilling my mission, which is on the one side, it's like the idea of like balancing physical and mental health, that they're not really treated in silos, or they're not really meant to be seen as silos, that, one does impact the other and vice versa.
Right.
And also, like mental health, sometimes when people think of the words mental health, there is a negative connotation associated with it. So the idea of trying to bring something forward that's invitational and allowing people to be open and curious and creating safety to talk about it. And so you're right, it is really different for different people. But when you share with me your insights, I feel like mission accomplished because I got
Yeah.
you to tap in and think about it.
Yeah, when we sometimes focus on mental health, we're really focusing on sometimes the negative aspects. I remember a decade ago, you couldn't even talk about mental health, let alone mental illness, right? So to be able to reframe it with optimism, like you did with the phrase "mental beauty," I
Mhm.
think again it gives us hope. I know it gives me hope, and so I'm sure it gives our listeners hope as well.
That's my hope, is to give everybody hope.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Faizan, are you ready to embark on our raw conversation?
Ooh, I was trying to avoid it, but okay, yes, let's do this.
Let's go for it. Okay, here's my first question for you. Faizan, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
The imperfect way.
Okay, the imperfect way.
Correct. Yeah. The imperfect way. That's how it would read. I think as I've gone through the last few years on this journey, and as you introduced it, the journey involves my wife. One of the things that I've had to be okay with is the fact that I won't get it right all the time.
Okay, okay. Very cool. It's great that you've touched on what that meant for you because I was about to ask if you hadn't. So that's awesome. Okay. So then Please tell us what your untold story is all about. Let's unpack that a bit more. Give us that skinny.
Hmm. So, in about 20, close to 2018, 2019,
Okay.
my wife, Dr. Syra, who is also a clinical counselor, she's a speaker, she's really motivating, and people look up to her for her guidance. She was going through this deep, dark depression
Mhm.
where there were many days I would go to work. You know, this was before COVID, so you had to go to offices. But many days I would go into the office. We had two kids at the time. We were living in the Vancouver area. But many days I would be at the office, unable to concentrate on work because I was worried I might get home and my wife may no longer be there. My kids may no longer have their mother. Like, you know, she was having suicide ideation. She was getting help at some point, but it was like, you know, there was this fear
Mhm.
of not being able to help, just losing someone so important to me in my life. And I wasn't very supportive on top of that. Right. So, like, the story really evolves from there. Obviously, she had to go on her journey, but I had to go look at all these parts of myself. So that's kind of the raw story, at least from the beginning.
Mhm. So, I mean, it sounds like as your wife did go through her own journey, which we've already unpacked in her
Hmm.
own episode, but from your perspective, going to work and being at work and worrying about what's going to happen to my wife and what thoughts is she having and will she end up executing her thoughts and
Hmm.
having fears about not being able to help her. And then you mentioned that you weren't very supportive. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, you know, there's this concept of growth mindset. So, from a personal growth perspective, I feel like I've been on this journey for the last 15 years, right? Like trying to learn more about myself.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, what I realized during that time was that I left it mostly in book knowledge in my head, but I didn't actually embody these concepts. And so one of the things that I struggled with Syra
Mhm.
was the fact that I judged her for being weak. Right. So for her to be depressed after, you know, getting a PhD in transpersonal psychology, I judged her for not being able to just push through, and she should be able to push through. I knew her life stories, you know, kind of some of the traumatic events she went through. It's like, okay, you pushed through all this time. You know, you were able to achieve the life, maybe not fully what you wanted, but like so much of it.
Mhm.
And why aren't you able to just push through again? And so instead of being able to just sit with her in her darkness, I was trying to fix her, and I was just trying to just pull her out of depression into quote unquote real life. And when she had her visitations with her doctors, and doctors suggested she may want to get on some medicine, right? Like take some medicine, take some pills. I was like, well, for how long are you going to do this? So instead of, again, working with her and supporting her, I was very crude and rude
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and not really there for her to help her through this dark place for herself.
Right. And I'm wondering though, thank you for exposing yourself to share that dark moment of what you experienced and how you viewed the situation at the time and how you participated in that piece with Dr. Syra. But I'm wondering if that was how you were showing up, would you say you were being held back by a lot of fear?
Oh, absolutely. Fear, you know, I kind of touched earlier about the core beliefs and, you know, kind of
Yeah.
the beliefs that I grew up with as well.
Mm.
You know, when I shared what Syra was dealing with some family members, you know, they told me, oh, you know, tell her to pray a little bit more. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah, so this should be easily fixable. So that was like one, is a belief system. But then there was also this fear of losing her. I don't think at this point I had ever experienced death in such a way, in such a close way, I guess, that this was a possibility. And so, yeah, so the fear of like, I need to fix this, right? I think that was also driving, is like, I need to fix this.
Right. And so tell me more about I need to fix this, that driving force.
Yeah, I've been one of those people who I feel like other people come to discuss their problems.
Mm-hmm.
What I've always taken that to mean is that I can be trusted to help them fix whatever problems they're having in life.
Mm-hmm.
What that allows me to do, or that at that point allowed me to do even more, was the fact that I never actually had to address my own flaws. I never had to look at my own flaws, right? Like, oh, this world really needs me. There's a whole big ego kick, but this world needs fixing, and I am the one. If people do it my way, they will be fixed.
Right. So the world needs fixing. I know how to fix them. People trust me to fix them. I'm the fixer. So
Mhm.
therefore, I don't have anything to fix. I'm the fixer.
Yeah, yeah, and then so when it hits home, especially with something like this, with where as I've gone through the journey, like I've learned, like, there's nothing for me to fix. I can't fix this, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing I can do with Cyrus' thoughts in her head, right? But it's taken, and it's still a journey that I'm on, is to kind of let go of that control and let go of those. But that the fear you were talking about, like for me, it was this control that if I could imprint what I wanted on life
Mm-hmm.
into other people's lives, that means my life was okay, right? Because it was kind of in my control.
Mm-hmm.
The fear at that point, honestly, was I'm losing control of my life.
Okay. And so this need to have control in your life, where does that come from?
I think it comes from other people controlling my life. At least that's what I felt, that my life was controlled, right? I had to be a good boy. And what it meant to be a good boy, as I was growing up, meant different things to different people. That I was going to be outgoing, I was going to be successful, I was also going to be quiet. Like, so it's like
Right.
this mixture somebody just threw into a blender and said, okay, well, if you do all of this, then you're a good boy. But it's like nobody sat me down and said, okay, right, like this is what we expect of you. Is it's just everybody's expectation. So from a control perspective, it was also, there's this part of this immigrant story,
Mm-hmm.
immigrating to the West from Pakistan, where I was born. And so part of that was also trying to stay safe. And so you try to, at least I tried to control my environment, right? I didn't want to be too brash, but I also don't want to be too small where I didn't succeed, right? Like, so it's like always trying to balance things, like have multiple balls in the air that you're trying to juggle. So that's just kind of what I became.
Right. And it's a really confusing message when you're growing up. You have these multi expectations that are coming from firing from different angles. And there's this definition of unspoken things of how to be a good boy. And it must have been so confusing to keep up with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I found confusing was I don't know when I turned into a man, right? So there was this boyhood,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then there's this piece about, like, what does it mean to be a man, right? Like, so at least in the cultural context that I come from, yeah, right? Like, you're a man when you're kind of providing for your family, you're a man when you're married, you're a man, when you have kids, and you're a man when you're in the society, being a leader, being a servant, right? Kind of in service and all of those things. But it's like this boy, first of all, didn't know how to be a boy, right? Because there were just so many different expectations, right? Like, of what it meant to succeed. At least in Pakistan, they used to rank you in your class, right? Like, so every month or every 6 months or every year, they tell you, oh yeah, you were number one in your class this month, this year, and you were number two or number three. And I used to come number one, and then one day I came in number three, and I'm like, oh no, I'm not a good boy anymore, right? And then same thing into being a man. It's like, okay, I can work, but then when I lost my work, I lost that identity. Now I'm like, okay, now I'm not a man. Again, based on things that are really outside of my control.
Mm.
And there's no transition that I remember. I went from being a boy to being a man one day. I don't know when it happened. I don't know if some will still question if it still happened for me. Have I still, or have I transitioned from being a boy to a man? Definitely different conflicting messages for sure.
And lots of different interpretations from other people. And it sounds like there was a lot of external validation that you were seeking because there was so much that you weren't taught. So you didn't know what path you were supposed to be on. So you were trying to take a whiff of everything.
Yeah. One of the things that I had to deal with once Syra got the help that she needed is start looking at all of these parts of me. And the most important part that I continue to look at of me is this part that does not feel like he's accepted or he belongs. Syra and I actually have the same part. It feels like it's like that. Oh my God, I don't deserve you, and you're gonna leave me. And so there was that part also, right? Like physically, her not being there was like, of course, right? Like I don't deserve this much love.
Mm-hmm.
She will leave me, whether physically leaving this planet or just leaving me altogether, right? Like so, it's like there's this part that always questions, do I deserve this, right? And then do I belong anywhere? Like that big part from boyhood into so-called manhood is this part that it's like I finally find a place, not a physical place, but like with the family, with Syra and the kids, like, okay, I feel like, I belong here. I feel like, this is
Does it feel like you finally made it? Like I've made it now? Like
yeah, yeah,
I did all the check marks, all the checklist.
exactly. And this is my own, right? Like, this is how my parents can't tell me what to do. My boss isn't going to tell me how to raise my kid, right? Nobody's going to tell me how to be
Right.
here. So I finally made it. And again, this is being taken away, right? Like, so I've had so-called stories in my life where it's like things get taken away. Like, oh, is this my home or not? Right. And so it's like this question always came up. And then that deep part for me, like kind of looking into those parts, I'm like, oh, this is what I've been trying to avoid my whole life. And now I'm just using Syra as an excuse. And now I can't anymore, right? Like whether she's here or not, I'm going to have to deal with this at some point.
Yeah. So did you start dealing with it?
I'm still dealing with, yeah. I have started, and I continue to deal with this part, right? Like there's still times in my life to this day where I question, when Syra says I love you,
Mm-hmm.
I question if she actually means it still, right? And I know she means it. I feel like compared to 4 or 5 years ago, I let it in more, right? I say, yes, thank you. I feel seen, right? But there are still days I still struggle with it and still struggle with letting that in. And what that now that I see it, now that I'm actually aware that I'm not letting that in, that means when I say I love you to her, when I say I love you to my kids, there's possibly a part of them that's not letting it in as well, right? And so I'm like, wait, that doesn't feel good either, right? So it's like, so it's that continue. I think I find it to be a continuous work.
Right. I mean, everything that we experience and, these themes and narratives and stories that we encounter and that we've grown up with, they do come along our journey, but it's about your awareness, right? And it sounds like you're building awareness and you are very intentional about your
Yeah,
process and you're reflective and you contemplate things, even if in the moment you might not have been as in tune with it.
absolutely. And I think, when I said the imperfect way, that to me is that imperfect way is that. So let me give you an example.
Sure.
When my wife and I got together, one of the ceremonies was that, my family goes over to hers
Mm-hmm.
without me. Like they take her gifts and all of those things. So Syra being, one of those people like, okay, well, you're here. Let's all get in a circle. Let's talk about how, what we appreciate about life, as she's always done this, at least her and her mom. Again, I wasn't there physically, but I heard from her. It's like, wow, your family thinks you're mad, you're angry, because all they said is like, wow, I can't believe Faizan found somebody who can manage his anger. And and here's how unaware I have been, right? I know that I used to just blow up. I found myself to be a very patient person, right? Like I won't let things bother me. I won't let things bother me. But it got to a certain point that it does bother me. And it's instead of, when somebody cuts me off, instead of like, wow, like, instead of just saying one word, now I'm like chasing them down and stuff like that.
Well,
But,
great.
it's like, but you could take any situation, right? I mean,
Right.
what I was unaware of was like, oh, these people see me as an angry person, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't see myself. And I'm like, wait, like, so I don't know what I'm putting out in the world, right? I don't know what energy I'm putting out. I don't know if this is how I want the world to see me.
Right.
And to struggle with that for a bit at the beginning, right? At the beginning where she was like, uh-oh, who am I getting together with? Because I didn't see this angry person.
Mm-hmm.
I was so unaware of how my anger used to just take over, right? Like it just used to envelop me in such a way that I was an arsonist, right? Like basically I would burn the village down.
Right. And, I'm beginning to think as you share this piece with me about how your awareness has been cultivated, I imagine that, when you say, yeah, I'm really patient, but then like I would blow up, I'm wondering if that was true patience or if that was you really just holding your breath because you were tolerating. And
Mm,
one thing we know about tolerating things is that we do blow up. As
mm.
when you're tolerating and shoving things under the rug, we sometimes see it as patience because we're not saying anything, but the reaction is still happening inside of you until it can't stay in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right in the sense that even beyond tolerating, I think I was more repressing it. And part of being a good boy that I was taught was I don't speak. I don't speak. I don't hurt other people's feelings. But I wasn't taught, and I don't know how many kids were in Pakistan or my age, but I know I'll take responsibility for myself here is that I wasn't taught, I didn't learn
Hmm.
how to express my emotions, right?
Right.
I didn't learn how to process my emotions.
Hmm.
In my meditation today, I had this image of like these fire ants, and like, but they're instead of dealing with the fire ants, I just like put a rug over these fire ants,
Right.
thinking like, okay, yeah, they're fine. But it's like, no, they're still there. They're still gonna come and bite. And pretending like they're not there doesn't actually help anybody. But that's how I dealt with my emotions my whole life is not deal with them, right? Not talk about grief and not talk about loss and not talk about
Right.
heartbreaks and then act out. Yeah, this patient piece is such a facade that I used to put on, like, wow, right? Like, such a calm energy. People used to tell me this, right? Like, I'm such a calm
Right.
energy. But now that I look back at my life, it's like, no, there's a child that's throwing tantrums all the time. I may not be doing it outwardly, but in my mind, I'm throwing tantrums all day long.
Right. Like you were swallowing it. It's like the unaware Faizan. I think that story or what you learned from interpretations, because no one really did teach you and you had no way of learning or knowing. But it comes down to that theme that was reiterated in your mind so many times. To keep quiet is to be patient.
Yeah.
I am being patient. See, I'm calm. It doesn't matter that what's happening on the inside as long as no one sees it on the outside. And then as you said, that culminated with your good boy theme.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that facade was actually a survival mechanism, right?
Yeah.
That I would be accepted in the family. Nobody told me these things, right? Nobody sat me down and said, hey, you stay shut and then you can belong in this family. Nobody said this, but I interpreted what other people were doing and saying.
Experiences you had from verbal or nonverbal cues or how people spoke about things and things you picked up on and maybe with a partial context, right? So you might have taken something out of context. There are all these unspoken rules, and then you put a story together for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, and stories it's such an important thing, right? Because then those stories develop even more and more.
And we forget to check out the facts. We forget to check out to see how valid these things are that we're telling ourselves. Like, where did this come from? How do you know? How did this come about? Right?
Yeah, and one of the things I've learned about stories in recent years is that how our brains try to validate our feelings about certain stories, right? So to keep me in the right, to be right, sometimes I have to add some spice that didn't actually happen, right? Like the facts were the facts. What happened, what happened. But like I had a little bit of a spice. Like they looked at me with those angry eyes, or the tone in the voice. Even though they may not have that tone, I don't
Right.
remember because this is like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I don't even remember exactly what happened. But like I'm adding spice into the mix as well, right? From a
Right.
story perspective.
Yeah, I can totally see that pattern. And that happens with all humans, right? The way when we're talking about narratives that we've had in the past and when we're uncovering what those are, that's
Hmm.
a big piece of what I learn with my clients too. And we learn about it together. We uncover, oh, so this was fact, this was fiction, right? And
Yeah.
learning to separate that.
Yeah, and it's such a don't know about your clients, but I know for me, it was very difficult in the beginning to let go of the stories because the stories I thought made me who I am. But it is actually what was lying underneath all of those assumptions that I made about people, about life, about this world, that were actually making me who I am. And so this, sometimes negative outlook that I have in my life, it's actually coming because of those assumptions that I made about people, those assumptions that I made. One of the skills that I had to learn was not actually focus on the story, but focus on the emotions behind it.
What are you feeling? Right.
Yeah, and to free myself, right? Like, so one of the things even with Sarah's story, right? Like that was her experience, but what I found was I was instead of supporting her, instead of standing in this fire with her, I was making it about me, right? I was making it about my potential loss. I was making it about my potential kids not having a mother. It was all about how it's going to impact me. To be able to get to that truth, like, oh, right. And then like, so I had 10 different groups and all of those. So like they've pointed this out to me. It's like, wait, this is about you. This is not about her now. Like, wait, no, it's about her. I want to be the good guy, right? I want to be the good man. I want to be the good husband. I am, right? I want her to stay alive and I want her not to be depressed. Like, yeah, but you want that for you. You don't want that for her. And that was like, it was such a slap in the face, like, because it woke me up. It was like, hey, you're lying to yourself, right?
Mhm.
Like you are lying to yourself. So you either tell the truth, you don't want to fix it, that's fine, but you have to tell the truth about what's actually happening.
Right. That is such a deep exploration that you were able to uncover for yourself. That is so, so real because it's such a big truth for you, right?
What I started doing was that I have always been the good guy, the good boy for myself. So like what it means to be a man, I'm still trying to figure out what it means. But
Mhm.
I know what it doesn't mean now is that I only look out for me and I look out for my safety, right? Because we say, oh yeah, I'm taking care of my family. But for what reason are you taking care of a family? Right? To give them opportunities or to say, hey, I have such a good family. I want to tell my brothers and I want to tell the people I grew up with, look at the great family that I have. Right. But to be honest about it, to say, you know what, I don't know. Sometimes we go into these dark places. Sometimes my wife and I are disconnected. Sometimes my kids, get on my nerves. It's okay, right? To be imperfect in this life, but to be able to say, wait, this is something about me and bring it back to be
Right.
able to say, like, how much of it can I let go?
Right. And really embrace your truth. I like it. I like that
Yeah.
you've been able to articulate that process. So, Faizan, when people come to see me for therapy, individuals, they typically present in one of three places. Some people are getting started where they're just trying to figure out what they even need to work on or where they need to go or trying to organize all the pieces. Some people are in the middle where perhaps there's an acute situation that's triggered all of these other life events that they've experienced or they're ready working on their true self. And some people are looking back where they're looking to get some closure or they want to take the next steps in their life. So they're ready to sort of do that personal growth piece. Now, what part of the journey would you say that you are in? Would you say that you're getting started in the middle or looking back?
I don't know if this is a cop out. I think I'm in all three phases, honestly. There are certain parts of my life that I feel I've been able to process, like certain parts of me where I can now show up as a leader and, I can show up and support other people as well. And then there's still parts of me that I haven't discovered. Right. I'm still scared to look, right. Like, so there's this men's group that I belong to currently where, we're tapping into that. Right. I'm still like, oh, like there's this part of me I never realized.
Right.
I feel like there's still parts of me that I haven't actually done the work yet on.
Well, rather than separating yourself into different parts, just think about your whole self, where you are right now, with this journey of uncovering your truth after witnessing your wife's journey and being in that journey with her and what's come up for you and what you've worked on. Where, with all of your parts, known and unknown, where would you say you are?
I think, and if looking at it as a whole, at this moment, I believe I'm in the kind of the personal growth stage, right? Kind of that last stage where it's like, okay, now it's that striving, that continuous striving to move forward.
Mhm.
A lot of energy, a lot of emotions have been processed in the last few years
Mhm.
to get to this point, and now it's like, okay, now how do I take all these lessons learned? How do I take all of this embodiment and actually improve, right? Actually do uh, that growth part now.
Right. And actually, that's what I want to ask you. Knowing that you're in this space of your journey, what do you want to remember about the process of your healing journey? What do you want to remember so that you can remind yourself if you're ever not feeling like you're in the looking back state?
Oh, that's floored me. That's a powerful question.
Mhm.
Um, I want to remember that my journey is actually an important service for my family. And so let me kind of explain, right? Like as my wife was going through her darkness, I saw my son, who's our eldest, he kind of changed, right? His personality changed because he was obviously also worried about his mom. He was 7 or 8 at the time. And so he was also struggling, right? And I couldn't be there for him because I wasn't aware of everything that I was going through either. And I believe me walking this journey, I hope it's a service, at least for him, is to figure out that he doesn't have to be perfect. He doesn't have to be the good boy. That he can stand up to his father if he needs to voice his opinion, and it won't make me love him any less, right? To be able to kind of get to that point with my son has been freeing, and that's what motivates me to keep on moving forward. Obviously we have a daughter as well, but at least for me, I know the connection that I have with my son's like, wait, I need to continue doing this so I can model this for him and I can free him from taking on things that are not his to take on as well, right? He can take on what he wants to and in his life and his journey, but he doesn't have to take my emotional baggage on, right? And so to be able to kind of remind myself of that regularly is such a helpful piece.
Right. Wonderful. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how your mental health was affected. So how your untold story affected your mental health. I know that we started to uncover some of the pieces about the emotional wounds and some of the core beliefs that were coming up for you and things that you were questioning. But are you able to talk a little bit more about any specific impacts to your mental health? Like, did you end up contemplating your life at any point, or what other emotions did you experience, or what sort of thoughts were you entertaining in your mind?
Yeah, I don't believe I ever contemplated a loss of my own life, but um, to do this much work, what I found was it took so much energy. Like once I said, okay, I need to go explore this about myself. What I found it did for me was it burnt me out to continue in the meantime to raise a family,
Hmm.
raise kids, manage work. And, I had high standards for my work. Like, I don't care what you're paying me, but if you're paying me something, I want to do the best. And then all of it while trying to process all of these emotions, right? And so one of the things that I've recently kind of explored about the past few years is how grueling it was and how mentally exhausted I was. There were so many days I just couldn't think clearly.
Hmm.
And so what happened at the end of 2019, I had a well-paying position. People at work, where I was working liked me, they looked up to me, but I just left it. Like, I mean, there were some changes that were happening, and maybe they thought I was moving on because I didn't like those changes, but like, I just needed a break. Like, I finally kind of broke down for 2 months, which is the longest stretch I've ever gone, ever not doing something with my life, right? Like, not working and not waking up and saying, okay, I'm going to go do something.
Mm-hmm.
It was so mentally exhausted that I couldn't sit in front of a computer. It was an effort to write hello. Like, it was an effort to just like, how do I greet somebody? Right? Like, it was that exhausting. So from a health perspective, I felt this pressure of now not trying to fix my wife, but now fixing me. Right.
Right.
And so I felt like I just burnt myself out trying to do that. And I think it took me like 2, 3 months just to get back into not even the workforce, but to say, okay, I want to go try something again. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it took a while just to get to that level.
Right. So, Faizan, what is your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you want them to know?
One of the things that helped me was this book called For the Four Agreements. And again, I had read so many books before, but to actually embody it. So there's Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. He's got these four agreements. So one of the things that actually helped me was this agreement about don't take anything personally, right? So at least for me, it helped me say, whatever is happening out there, it's not about me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't have anything to do with me, but that helped me. But
Mm-hmm.
what also, like, the last agreement that he has is talks about always do your best. Once I actually embodied it, that, you know what, I'm going to do my best. And today my best might not be as good as yesterday. And it might get better tomorrow. It might not. Right. So whatever my best is in this moment, that's what I can do. And sometimes the best means I can show up on a podcast. Sometimes the best might mean I can't wake up. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is that you show up, once I embodied it, what it also allowed me to do is, when dealing with other people, it helped me give them the benefit of the doubt that they're just doing the best they can.
Mm-hmm.
Now, their best might not be what I like. Their best might not be what I appreciate, but I can accept them, right? And what that allowed, again, at least with my relationship with
Mm-hmm.
Syra, was like, she's doing her best and she'll be fine. And whatever her best calls her to be, when she's not fine, that's okay as well, because that's the best she could do on that day.
Right.
And it kind of freed us. It took this dark depression that was kind of like a wall between our relationship. It kind of broke that down. But I see that if I can do that more and more with other people as well, not just in my intimate relationships, it frees my energy up to be with them. So I hope, what people take away is, do your work, like, go do that introspection and take responsibility for your own emotions and your feelings. But know that your best today might be different than what it is yesterday. And be gentle with yourself, and then be gentle with others.
Right. It's a beautiful message. Okay. So I know you just talked about the four agreements and how that book was so helpful for you. But what I wanted to ask, and maybe there's something else that you might be able to share, I was curious about what was that game changing inspiration that's close to you that reflects your untold story. So sometimes people tell me about a book or a quote or a mantra or an event or a person that really spoke to them.
Yeah, I was just going to say connection. I'm a bit of an introvert. If you left me alone in the house for a few days, I'd still be in the same spot, probably just sitting there and being okay with it. But what I found, what helped me along this journey, was connecting, and at least as a man, connecting with other men that were taking responsibility, that were going to hold me accountable, that were going to call me out. And that helped. One of the places where I went was the Mankind Project, and a group that I attended, if anybody is in the Vancouver area, it's called the Dark Horse Eye Group. And, where they kind of helped me and they held me and they supported me. But wherever you go is being able to connect and allow yourself to be held by somebody else, allow yourself to be supported. And so that, if I can, ever preach that as I'm preaching here, is like, allow for that connection, allow that time for connection, be okay, step out of your comfort zone and go be with other people who might be different, who might look at the world differently, and see, what stories you're telling yourself and what stories you're telling the world. And that helped me immensely.
Right. And so connection for you was that inspiration. That's what allowing yourself to be supported really helped you to open up and move forward and move through some of the experiences you were.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And connecting, at least for me, was connecting with other men, even more so because I saw there different types of men that show
Right.
up in the world, and they're all okay, right? That they're all
Right.
showing up differently. They're all taking care of their families differently, but that's okay, right? Like, and that I can make my own definition of how I want to show up.
Right. Amazing. Okay, so what is an organization or a cause that's been impactful to you on your journey that you would like to give a shout out to? Who are they?
I just mentioned Mankind Project.
Mhm.
There's Psychology of Vision with Dr. Chuck Spezzano, who I kind of keep on referring back to constantly, and his model of the triangle, the relationship triangle, which helps me immensely to go deeper and deeper for myself. And yeah, and so those two organizations are a wonderful resource and breadth of resource for that have helped me.
Wonderful. So the Mankind Project and Psychology of Vision.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so how can people connect with you if they would like to? What platforms are you available on?
I'm available on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and then my wife and I, we also regularly put out content on our YouTube channel, just called Dragonfly Wellness TV.
Awesome. All right, so we'll make sure that all of your handles are on the show notes page if they're not already on there. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So, Faizan, guess what?
What?
You've just dared yourself to share. Congrats.
Uh, yeah, no, and I do want to thank you for one, creating such a safe space, and then asking those powerful questions,
Mhm.
which I know as a therapist, you're like, yeah, I do this all the time. But I know for folks like me, it helps us get even deeper into ourselves and getting to know ourselves more. So thank you for the space.
Oh, you're welcome. And Faizan, I would just like to take a moment to express my gratitude for the deep stories shared in the space today, sharing the impacts, the insights, and the vulnerabilities of what you experienced as you went through your own parallel journey, as your wife went through hers, and what she encountered during her own dark period, and you coming to terms with your dark periods. That was a really important perspective to untangle. Your story is such an important one to share and to be heard. And I know it will encourage others to recognize their own journey, especially when they might be focused on their partner. So I'm truly grateful to have been able to hear and witness your story today. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all of the daring and sharing.
You're so welcome. I appreciate it.
Amazing. And once again, Faizan, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.